Welcome to this video on privacy by design. As a part of engineering and architecture, whenever we are building a system or we are designing security requirements or something like that, one of the things that often overlooked is privacy. And privacy is separate than security itself. So, data privacy is all about the information that's collected or processed and the fact that we need to keep it protected from unauthorized access. And that normally stems to some kind of law or regulation that is dictating that we need to do so. And this video is going to be specifically relating to the 7 foundational principles of privacy by design. And that's in a paper called Implementation and Mapping of Fair Information Practices. Privacy by design starts with being proactive. Everything is proactive. We need to think things through, especially when we are engineering, because we are looking to design a solution that's going to solve some kind of problem. So we want to be proactive and not reactive. So we want to think things through but not react to them after they have happened. And we want to look for things that are preventive versus remedial, meaning we are trying to prevent versus fix it after the fact. That's the first principle. The second principle is privacy setting by default. Privacy needs to be default setting in anything that we are doing. Number 3 is privacy embedded into design. So just like when we consider security being built into the system, instead now we are looking at privacy being built into the system. Number 4 is full functionality. Everything working together in order to protect privacy. So they call it positive sum, not zero sum. Number 5, being end-to-end security, which is full life cycle of protection. And we will talk about that as we talk about the life cycles, development life cycles, things like that. Number 6, being visibility and transparency, meaning keep the system open. We talked about open system and closed system, and that's what we are talking about here. We are focused on open, having everything visible, all the products, all the services, all those things being visible while we are protecting the data and other things like encryption key and so on. Number 7 is the respect for the privacy. Keep it user-centric. So this is the last principle. And a lot of time this is driven by law and regulation, that there's a lot of transparency for the user to access their data, be able to manipulate the data, and also be able to use the data in other places. So let's dive into each one of these principles a little deeper so that you can understand what takes place here. Starting with proactive and preventive. So as I said, this is to think things through and anticipate things before they actually happen. So we want to anticipate and prevent that unauthorized access of data. So if we have private data on system, where it is, and what are the attack vector that can get to it? What are the pathway that would lead us to the data? Where does the data get processed? Where does it get used? Those kind of things. We want to think them out of part of our design and the engineering process. We also want to commit to enforcing high security standards. Oftentimes we get caught up when we are doing engineering. We are building system, cost, budgeting, resources, schedule, other things like that. They come into play and they impact the design. What we really want to focus on here is the higher standard, going above and beyond to make sure the data is protected. In the event that we have a breach or a compromise, this is going to go a long way from a due diligence and due care standpoint when we hit a courtroom and have to justify why we did things that way we did. If we show that we went above and beyond and an attacker was able to compromise it, then so be it. Now, no one perfect, and that's why things are going to be. However, if we just check the box and moved on, then we are likely to be liable in the situation. And along those lines, We want to identify poor privacy design through assessment and remediation, specifically privacy impact assessment, where we are looking at how is this data being used, how it's being exposed, where the flaws, the vulnerabilities and might impact this data and so on. And we can also couple that with security assessment, risk assessment and analysis, and then providing correct remediation in order to mitigate that particular risk. So that's proactive and preventive. Privacy as default. This is where we are providing the automatic and maximum amount of protection for the privacy related data. So we are talking about the actual collection of data, how we are collecting it, making sure that we are only collecting what we need to collect, and that we are following fair information practices and defining the purposes, the scope, the limitations and the retention of the particular data. Remember, we never want to keep data for any longer than absolutely necessary. So if there is a mandate by law or regulation, then we keep it that long. But we want to minimize the data as soon as we no longer need it. We need to destroy the data, properly destroying it. That way, we are not keeping PII or PHI, personal identifiable information or protected health information on the system for any longer time than necessary. And we want to make sure that is built into the system and that we are clearly identify our use, retention and disclosure requirement as a part of our design. Then we have embedded in design. This is where we are building privacy protection into the system throughout the development life cycle. And also throughout operation and production. And we are performing privacy impact assessment and responding to known risk. So part of this design is that we are constantly evaluating the design to make sure that it meets our current standard, our current requirements, and that is meeting our governance regulation, and that we are compliant with that. And then we also want to minimize and mitigate any known technology risk through the system design. So if we are using older products, vulnerable products, we have a patch management cycle in place, or that we are upgrading those products as they become end of service or end of life. Full functionality is all about privacy design. That should not impede the organization mission, objective or purposes. It means that we are implementing privacy protection throughout the entire scope of technology, using our full functionality to perform all of privacy protection needs. But we do not want that to impact the organization mission, the objective or any business processes. When security means privacy should be throughout and protected their entire data lifecycle. So that's from end to end, from creation to destruction. We are protecting and handling that data correctly. So security has to be implemented with no gaps whatsoever when it comes to privacy, and also compliance to governance and regulation. Visibility and transparency is about establishing that accountability. We want to show that we are accountable and that we are properly protecting the data like we are supposed to. And we do, as we say, we are going to in accordance with the governance, regulation and compliances, so that we have those privacy policies in place. We make them available to our users, to our customers and so on, to provide that visibility, that transparency, to build trust, so they know they can trust their data with us. And then we also show what kind of compliance we are required to adhere to, whether it is PCIDSS, whether it is HIPAA, GDPR or so on. And then lastly, we have to respect the user privacy. This is where we are keeping privacy efforts focused on individuals. Remember that it's their data. That's how I like to think of it when I do my work. And I am sure others do the same. This is not our data, this is their data. It is the user data or the customer's data. So we want to protect it as we would protect our own. So we want to make sure that we are getting explicit consent, for use of any private or sensitive data, and we want to make it easy for them to access their information and to leverage any kind of privacy protection feature they may feel necessary to protect their data. So as we are looking at this from a system perspective, when we are looking at being proactive and not reactive, that means that when we are collecting data on a web server, we are providing the best possible security mechanism on this web server to protect our private data. And we are trying to build this into the design as a preventive measure versus having to react and provide some remediation for things that we overlooked. And the same as privacy as default setting. Everything here should have privacy as a default built into it. If it is processing PII, PHI or other protected information, then privacy embedded into design. Same thing with, let's say, an authentication server. When we are creating accounts for our user to buy some products or whatever it might be, take your privacy into consideration. We allow you to see, we allow you to use your name, your email ID, but we are not asking for any other information that might disclose any other personal identifiable information, account number or anything like that. We make sure that we embedded this privacy into the design to protect you from end to end. Then we also have full functionality. That means that when we are running an authentication service on the inside, we are not over securing them to the point where they are impacting business processes. What if this is a streaming services like Amazon or Netflix or something like that, where those accounts require a little bit more information, say credit card information? We don't want that to impact that business process. So we want to make it easy for our customer to input the data that we will need to charge for their services. But we don't want it to slow down or impact the business functionality. End-to-end security again is full life cycle. So when we are talking about moving data from one place to another, it's moving through the network. Going up to the storage server, we want to make sure the data is protected throughout the entire life cycle, whether it gets created here or the web server, and then stored on the storage server. We want to protect it while it is in transit and then while it is at rest on the storage server. And then lastly, we want to make sure that this is completely visible to our user, so that anyone using our system can access their information they need and that they have provided to us when it's requested. So the bottom line for this video is just to understand the privacy by design principle that we covered here in this video.